Mike Cousineau, our co-CEO, is going to talk about the power of leadership. And again, we really appreciate everybody coming today and the attention. Welcome, Mike. There you are.
Thank you, Sloan. As you heard, I am your last speaker of the day. So as Chris Paradise said earlier, he was an obstacle. I too am an obstacle between you and the cocktail hour. So I hope I have your attention now. So I'll try to go through this briefly. Before I get started, I do want to sincerely, along with my partner Chris Paradise and all of us at PMX, really sincerely thank all of you for investing in a day here. Your participation, your passion that you bring, and your presence really doesn't go unnoticed. So we really do thank you. And we do hope that today you gain some additional insights and thoughts into some of the ways you can apply the thinking into your business and your program. So I just want to make sure that I got that out there. And thank you very much. What we're going to do is I'm going to talk a little about leadership, and I'm going to kind of shift a little bit away from what we have discussed. So today you heard a lot about multiple things. So as you think about things about consumer behavior, you talk about emerging technologies. Of course, you heard about Amazon. You heard Tim from Google talk about profitability and lifetime value and return on investment, all those things. Every one of those things you heard today in some way is ultimately there to try to improve the programs that you're working on. And the ultimate goal of improving a program is to drive profitability, to drive performance. So in some way, everything we discussed, it might not be necessarily tomorrow when you talk about AI, for example, but it's all really designed to drive performance. And at the end of the day, again, performance is really about driving profitability. I'd like to then talk about leadership and try to make that same kind of correlation. And more often than not, people separate leadership from business performance. When people think about leadership, they typically think about culture. They typically think about retention of employees, things like that. More often than not, they don't think about how leadership and business performance are actually correlated. There's actually a connection between the two. And one does affect the other. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of research and some data to try to support that. But the point being is to try to change the thinking a little bit and understand that while we talk about emerging technologies and how they might impact and improve the performance of our programs, leadership inside the business, leadership inside the organization has that same type of impact. I'm going to start with two circles of leadership, and again, these are typically separated, and there's some great data that says actually there's a big correlation between the two. As a matter of fact, there was a broad study by a leading motivational psychologist that looked at leaders that use and apply some very specific, they call them emotion intelligence traits, have outperformed financial targets by 15 to 20%. So that's quantifiable. That is quantified. That is 15 to 20% of the financial targets. So right there we have a broad study with some really rich data that really ties business performance and leadership into one correlated effort. When you think about leadership, and a lot of times it's about what are the traits, what are the characteristics that define leadership, and it can get complicated quickly, and none of us have nailed or I would say outperformed in the role of leaders. It is something that is very challenging. We all struggle with a little bit, and I think that what we try to do every day is strive to be better with leadership, and all of us have some type of leadership position, some maybe more than others, but at the end of the day, it is something that is evolving. There's some new thinking, I'll get into that, but at the same point, leadership is really about trying to keep it simple. And so what I've done is I have a slide here I'll get into to show my view of trying to keep leadership simple. That might not look simple, by the way, but hang with me. Bear with me. On the left, to my right, to the left, You have the typical org chart, which is you have called the senior management team at the top, and then as you go more down, you have at the bottom, kind of the foundation, you have the people. And on the right, you have the model where the triangle is reversed. So you actually have the senior team on the bottom of the organization, and then you have the rest of the staff on the top. And the point here is simple, that the senior team is there to be the ones to serve the organization. They're there to serve the people, to support the people, kind of be the foundation of the company. They're there to lead by example. They're to be kind of the anchor. And rather than this everyone kind of supporting the senior management team, it's actually the senior management team supporting the company, supporting the people. So try to flip that around a little bit, and back to the simplicity of leadership. Rather than get into all these traits that I mentioned earlier that float around when you talk about leadership, if you just think about how do we serve as leaders? How do I serve the business better? How do I lead by example a little better? What can I do with some of the kind of communication I'm having? And every day kind of bring that kind of, that how do I serve the people, serve the organization mentality? And that really is the fundamental of leadership. You can talk about all the traits, but it really boils down to that level of simplicity. See, I told you it was going to be simple. Moving on to leadership development, which is also a very critical part of the whole leadership chain, and how are we developing our staff, and how are we developing those, the kind of the rising stars, if you will, and the people, the staff that have some of the high potential. So there was a great study by the CEB, which is the Corporate Executive Board, and it showed that 66% of the companies actually have a tangible and a monetized investment into the identification of the rising stars in the company. So they actually have a process, they've invested in it to really try to help identify and try to understand what makes those people that seem to move up the track faster successful. Of those companies, only 24% of the executives said that they believe those programs are successful. So less than 1 out of 4 executives at the companies say that the leadership or the process they use to identify rising stars is successful. It's a lot of work when you think about that. And even just to be a Debbie Downer one step further, 13% of the senior executives in general said that they have a high level of confidence in the company's ability to nurture and to grow and to develop these next set of high potential employees. So you can just kind of see a lot of the work that needs to be done. And this gets back to how complicated it is, how difficult that no one has this nailed. And so I think the more we're aware of it and the more that we accept that there's a lot of work to do, I think the more likely we are to make progress with it. When it comes to some of the types of characteristics that we use to identify the right types of employees that might be on a faster track. And if you look at a little bit of history, there's a lot of them again, and I won't go into it, but some that stick out are determination, curiosity, grit, so to speak, passion, humility, et cetera. These are what we call kind of singular in nature and very, very important. I think that there's no way that the data suggests you can be a strong, successful leader if you don't have these traits. Again, you're not going to be high in every one of these, but you have to have a certain level and element of each one of these traits. There is some new thinking, however, on these types of traits. A great study by the Harvard Business Review found that there were they identify 7 key competencies that have been identified as you look at this set of high identifying employees that have the highest potential. I won't go through all, but you can see a little of a shift here. You see things like collaboration. You see things like influencing others and team leadership, strategic orientation. If I go back again, you see somewhat of a singular process, kind of a singular set of characteristics, very much about the individual and the individual themselves. And then you see these, you see a little more of interaction. So in this world that's moving so fast, and as business and the technologies and the data that keeps coming in and the speed by which we're moving, you can see the need that they're now identifying for people that work a little bit more in this environment where there has to be collaboration, there has to be interaction. And even to take that one step farther, they've identified what they call the 8th trait, And it's a little bit on these lines, and it's a trait that's picking up a lot of momentum and has a lot of companies really spending a little more time thinking about, and that is inclusiveness. And it gets back to that same set of traits again, where you see a lot of this interaction, the need to be able to communicate effectively, inform people at the right time, and have the level of communication necessary to keep projects moving. You know, you hear people say, why didn't I hear about that? And all of a sudden, then you start to get the breakdown of things. You say, well, you know, I wasn't included, or I heard that late, et cetera. So part of this inclusiveness, which I always identify as a sense of the ultimate way to identify, you know, am I talking to the right people? Am I informing the right people at the right time? Am I bringing the right people into meetings? And sometimes it's not the attitude that everyone that you inform is there because they might impact a project, but it's people just need to be informed. So to be informed, I think, gets people feeling inclusive. So sometimes I think we miss the opportunity of just informing people, oh, by the way, or I wanted to forward you this so that you were in the loop. Those types of things are really important to people, and I think as you get some of these traits, people see that the breakdown in leadership happens quickly because of some of these tensions that are created that are can really go away reasonably easy the more you think about inclusiveness. In summary, there are 3 takeaways that I want to kind of leave you with. The first is, again, believing wholeheartedly that there is a connection, there is a correlation between how a business performs and leadership. And the data suggests that. So I think as we kind of go forward, we think about how can we impact our business. Certainly a lot of the stuff you heard today in terms of audience and audience behaviors can have a large impact on the business. Again, just to reiterate, I believe that leadership can as well. Effective leadership can have that same type of impact. You saw the number 15 to 20% from a very broad research study. The second is to keep the thought of leadership and the thinking of leadership, again, simple. If we overcomplicate it, we won't execute on it. And convince all of ourselves that leadership is in front of us, and there are steps we can take immediately when we walk in the door tomorrow at work. And that step is simply, again, to kind of, I understand that I am serving this company, I'm serving the people I'm here to support, and I am part of the foundation of the business. So what does that mean? How do I lead by example better? And keep pressing yourself on that. There's actually 4. The third, I'm going to add 1. The third is the new thinking around some of the leadership traits that are less singular and more inclusive. I think you're going to hear more and more about the power of some of those traits that really, if you look back 10 years ago, you didn't see much talk about that. So this talk about collaboration, inclusiveness, I think that it's going to gain a lot of momentum. So really understand the need for those types of people and those skill sets and traits as we're trying to identify the right types of people, whether it's through an interview process or just on day-to-day development. And the fourth and final is to take the leadership information on a daily basis and try to every day inform someone else about what you're doing with leadership. Don't be afraid to be critical of yourself in a healthy way. Don't be afraid to ask yourself some of those tough questions around what am I succeeding at when it comes to leadership? Where do I need the most work, and what am I going to do to kind of seek that out? So I think to be self-critical, again, in kind of a healthy way is a good thing. And you go back to one of those traits being humility. You really have to bring some humility to this. Again, none of us have figured this out. Nobody has. And if they say they have, it's not true. So bring in a little bit of that self-critical process to your own evaluation of yourself in a way that simply helps inform and shapes the way you execute leadership. And I think by every day, if you keep asking yourself some of those critical questions, you're more likely to be aware and you're more likely to deliver on that. And I think you should see results doing that. And that is it. I was told to be brief, so there. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Paradise.
No, I didn't go home. Well, on behalf of the 2 of us, really, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully you got through all this and were able to hang in through the detail. Clay is holding a special session later for those of you that need a refresher on blockchain, and he will invite you to his garage.
And cryptocurrency.
He's got 10 special VIP tickets. And you heard from Vito that it's all about the art of the chase and other magical statements. Hopefully some of these last with you. All the sessions were terrific. Thank you for the speakers. Again, thank you for all of you that we work with every day. We love your business. We so appreciate that you're here. It's such a big deal for us to be part of your business. We're trying to figure out with you some very, very complicated things, but know in us you've got a tremendous amount of passion and dedication and investment, and it's great you got to meet Mark and get his perspective as well. By the way, the main investor in the Stagwell Group, therefore PMX agency, is Steve Ballmer, one of the co-founders of Microsoft. So we've got some firepower behind us. Don't feel shy about challenging us with tough questions. There are 100 developers in Toronto right now working on a lot of projects for a lot of clients. So bring that on to us. Don't just wait for a meeting or some QBR or something. We really do need your input. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.